All right. Well, hey, just want to say this is going to be a real honor to be able to have interview our guest here, the first Black professional triathlete, Max Fennell. And it's been I've known of you for I've seen you for many years since my comeback to the sport. And it's just really a treat and an honor to be able to be here on this interview. And I'm really looking forward to just unpacking your journey and what your mission and your initiative. I've really wanted to diversify the endurance sports. And so welcome, Max, and thank you for just your time.
Hey Brian, yeah, thanks for having me.
Yeah. So just let's start off. First of all, just tell us your journey, how it all started, and just take it from there, and we'll just begin to unpack as we go along. And you throw in also what your mission is as well. Okay, go ahead.
Yeah, yeah, sure. So I guess the real journey of where everything started was I was working at a coffee shop in Ardmore, and I was recently trying out for the Philadelphia Union. Like they were, it was
Ah,
right before the
yeah.
Philadelphia Union was like officially created, so they were having all like these pickup soccer games and stuff like that. So I was playing a pickup soccer game, and I ended up spraining my MCL during the game. A goalkeeper came out, slide tackled me, and I hurt my knee during
Mm.
that. And it was pretty much a career-ending injury because I wasn't going to be
Wow.
able to try out for the union or anything like that. But while I was working at this coffee shop in Ardmore, I had this gentleman come in and say, he was like, "Oh, I see you're limping." Like, I was like, "Yeah, I hurt myself." He's like, and I was, trying out for the union. He's like, "Oh, well, what are you gonna do now?" And I was like, "Well, I heard about the Philadelphia triathlon, so maybe I'll go jump into that and see how that goes." And he was like, "Whoa, you're gonna want to like train for it and get yourself ready." So he ended up lending me a bike and giving me some gear. And I ended up, my first ever triathlon was the Philadelphia Tri, and I was instantly hooked because I think I placed like seventh or ninth in my age group. It was a great time. We swam in the Schuylkill River, and you ride all throughout Martin Luther King Drive and Kelly Drive and past the museum and everything like that. It's on this gorgeous course, and I was hooked. And I ended up, trying competing more the rest of that year, and I ended up winning my age group. And so when I won my age group, I was like, oh, maybe I should stick with this and see where it goes. And
Yeah.
then a few years later, I ended up qualifying for my pro card.
Wow. So gosh, man. So you saw your potential, right? And then that's like, huh, right?
Absolutely.
So now prior to the offer to say try triathlon, what did you do to start training and how did that happen? And how,
Well, I mean, growing up in King of Prussia, a lot of folks don't realize we live right next to Valley Forge, right? Valley Forge Park. And I think at that time they hadn't really built out the Schuylkill River Trail. I know now the Schuylkill River Trail is much more elaborate and way more built out. But when I first started out, we used to just ride through Valley Forge Park and head out to the countryside and ride out that way. So I spent a lot of time just riding and running in Valley Forge Park. And then early on in my career, the owner of the bike company I used to ride for, it's called Elite Bicycles. It was a Philadelphia brand. This guy
oh,
David, the owner David Greenfield, introduced me to John Kenny,
oh,
and David Greenfield, the owner of Elite Bicycles, goes to John and says, "Hey, Max is up and coming. Maybe take him under your wing and show him the ropes." So John, through the introduction, I met John, and then I started, training and learning everything I could underneath John, and that's when I started, swimming. And there's a pool right by me that we would train at. And I remember that was the first time when someone had told me that you have to be waking up at like 5 a.m. to get like to swim at like 6 a.m.
yeah.
And then while I was, being mentored underneath John, he also suggested, and I think it was through John I had the introduction to Shannon Grady, and then
Right.
Shannon Grady essentially became kind of like the head coach that really kind of took, the overall approach of like how are we going to really take me as just a general athlete, or at that time as a soccer player, and then really just, molding me and turning me into an athlete. So,
Hmm.
John was kind of like my mentor, and, Shannon Grady was kind of like the head coach that was kind of like overseeing the entire picture.
Question. So from a soccer background, so when Shannon's seen the bigger picture there of the development, how would you describe were the phases of that development? And then you experiencing those phases kind of go on both sides. You're seeing the macro and then how you were experiencing that development.
Well, I think, one of the biggest things, and this is why David, I think, introduced me to John, is because in the triathlon community, especially when I was coming up, John was kind of known as like the human fish, like the fastest swimmer.
Sure,
Just,
yeah.
like you knew John was showing up that he was just gonna like blow everyone out of the water. So, with me not growing up as a swimmer in triathlon, you want to learn from a swimmer how to become a strong swimmer,
Mm,
right? So there was a strong emphasis of putting a lot of time in the water, and then also trying to manage the cycling and the running together to kind of just build me as an overall athlete. Because again, when you're a soccer player, you're an endurance athlete, but you're more of a power-based endurance athlete. And
mm.
with triathlon, you need to be more of like an endurance aerobic athlete.
Okay, okay. And then Shannon was putting all those pieces together. And from the endurance and the science behind that, she was doing some lactate testing on you and all that. And so,
Yeah. I know. I think she's one of the leading exercise physiologists in lactate testing, because a lot of folks don't realize is, for instance, like I'm wearing a smartwatch.
mhm,
Um, I was kind of in the middle of like triathlon. I would say like the middle, like that later middle growth of triathlon, where we didn't have smartwatches, we barely even had computers, we didn't have the Stravas,
yeah.
or anything like that. So if you really wanted to see significant gains, you had to have a coach that understand heart rate testing and lactate testing to have like, things more of a scientific based
Mhm,
program.
mhm.
Whereas now, yeah, you got a smartwatch, you got computers,
Power,
you got
watts. Yeah.
power, all that. Where back then, it's like everybody was just shooting in the dark.
Mm,
And when you work with somebody that's, like as professional and high caliber of a coach and exercise physiologist like Shannon Grady,
mhm.
since it's so scientific based, you see so much growth in your potential. So it's like for me, it's like I didn't know what to do, but when somebody's having all the data behind it, and then you're going through this growth period, then you become a much stronger athlete, whereas if you're just shooting in the dark.
Okay, so now from the point of the pro achievement, and the first triathlon, was it the first triathlon first that just did you have any training? Was all of this that you're explaining right now with John and Shannon, was that prior to the first triathlon or after it?
After, yeah. So that was like, I think it was the end of that. I think it was the following year was when I met John, because I think the first year I just kind of went through just doing my own thing,
Okay.
just do racing local races, just trying to figure it out, just doing basic training, friends telling me to swim here and there, doing that type of stuff. But I believe it was that following Philly try, because I believe I was introduced to John at the Philly try, right? And then John was just like, "All right, let's get together." And then I met Shannon shortly after that.
Okay, so then it's now and so pro card now it was about becoming pro, right? So you want to now develop yourself to your highest potential because you had that goal in mind, right?
Yeah, so it was like, hey, I won my age group, and then you start looking into it. Like I didn't know anything about triathlon, and I started looking into it and seeing like, oh, people are professional. And obviously I looked around, and I didn't see many people that look like me. So I was just like, all right, maybe I can make a name for myself in the sport, as well as I was good at it, right? So I wanted to stick with it. But with triathlon, um, it's much more enjoyable when you have the right coaching and guidance out the gate, right? So when you work with like a Shannon Grady and a John Kenny that are so experienced and they're so professional, especially with any type of development, like developmental athlete, right? That athlete's going to have a much more enjoyable time in triathlon, with those type of individuals, because they've worked with so many athletes, they've had so much success with the growth of athletes that they really kind of know what you're going to, encounter as an athlete, as a person, because you got to understand what are you going to face in the industry, what are you going to face when it comes to the racing, and then what are the things that you're going to face as the growth as an athlete, as becoming an athlete.
Okay, and so then from there, you then started, you just now you saw that your performance was increasing, and then you saw there's not many black folk like you, right? And so like what then when did this sense of I really want to diversify, where was that connected to when you saw the ecosystem and then became more savvy to the triathlon culture of it and all that? Where did all that come into play?
I mean, I think that's so long ago. It's kind of hard because I was so focused as an athlete trying to achieve that goal of becoming a pro.
Mhm.
That all I can really remember are bits and pieces of like conversations that I had. I always had this very strong support system. Shannon and John always understood the weight of what it was that I was trying to achieve.
Yeah.
So, I don't know when it ever clicked because I just think that everyone there was just a point where I was like, all right, I know I'm gonna become the first Black professional triathlete.
You
And then
knew that.
part of that,
You knew
yeah,
that.
I knew that. Yeah, I knew that. And then, I vocalized that to my coaches and then they supported me. I remember John one time took me down to a training camp in Austin. That was like back in the day, that's how triathletes, pro triathletes used to train. They would all meet up together during the winter time and they, in a warm climate and train with each other. So, I had that as my first experience. Shannon went with me to like a few of my races and helped guide and help coach me through my races. She helped coach me through my first ever my pro race that was in Miami. Right. So, you know, I don't know if there's ever a single moment. I think everyone just knew that entire journey up into getting my pro card, was going to be something very significant.
Hmm. Okay, and then so then once you became pro, um, then then what happened? What began to start seeing? How did you start seeing opportunity, and what kind of drove you from that point forward?
Well, I think once I turned pro, that's when I made the decision that I was going to have to move out to California. And, simply because it was like, where I was in life in the sense that I was just like, I'd grown up in Philadelphia and I just, my last winter there, I had gone for a run in like 9 degrees. And then I, I, I one time went for a bike ride in 19 degrees and then I got caught out in the blizzard. So I rode my bike in the blizzard. I came home and it was so cold. And at that time, I was also having Olympic dreams. So it was like, in order for you to try and chase that Olympic dreams, you were going to have to join like a triathlon team.
Yeah.
So once I turned pro, I was like, all right, maybe I should like really make that sacrifice. Go find the top athletes. So a lot of folks know Joe Malloy out of Wildwood. I went and trained with him. And really what that is it's a testament that a lot of folks don't realize that out of the Northeast, out of that region, where I grew up, it's for some reason we just make amazing athletes out of that area, right?
Mhm.
Yeah, it's
Why do you
something
think
about
that's so? Because of the harshness of the environment, the grit it creates?
yeah, I think it's just we live in a gritty area and it's like, like it's like a coach like John, right? He has a level of empathy, but a level of tough love at the same time, right? Like I distinctly remember when, he like I missed like a swim. He's like, dude, you gotta like come to practice, like you gotta be swimming early in the morning. You gotta be swimming X amount of yards if you want to be the best, right? So, I think and one thing that we have a mentality that we have coming out of that area is that like we have this mentality of like okay yeah you just won a race but the next day you can do better, right? Or like you might do 10, like I remember when I did like 2100s on the 120 in a meter pool at Stanford And I remember all the Upper Marion and Philly folks would be like, "That's great, Max." you know, do 20 more of those on the 120, right? We just have this mentality that like, yeah, that's great when you do it's like kind of like a Kobe Bryant mentality, right? Of
Uh-huh.
like you can do better, right? We're going to celebrate those wins, but the next day you can do better.
Wow, wow, yeah. Yeah. That is so true. I mean, I'm originally a West Coaster, in Southern California, and then now I live in King of Prussia. My wife, she's third generation here in Upper Marion and all that, and so, and then being out here for the last 27 years, I understand. I can see the contrast between two cultures, West and East, is very different. There's definitely that what you that journeyman kind of grit, and so. And then in John, with how you express John, so true. So yeah. So now moving forward, then how did what were some significant then milestones for you that then be as you now what happened when you became pro? Was it now when was media began to start opening up this whole conversation, and then also, oh, okay, now I'm going to really take responsibility on this mantle and really further it for a bigger cause. I mean, what happened all of that?
Yeah, so I think that was the coolest thing was all the media attention that I got and the additional support that I got. I still say one of the moment where I felt I really was a pro,
Mhm.
believe it or not, wasn't so much when I was starting on this was when I was standing on the starting line for a triathlon. It was when I was in a TV show that was executive produced by LeBron James called $1 Million Mile.
Wow.
And the one of the producers had told me, they're like, Max, I just want to let you know that like it was LeBron James's team and LeBron, they're the ones that chose you to be here at this opportunity. Right. And I was the only person out of his production company that chose me. And it was because I had to reach that status of being a professional triathlete as the first Black American professional triathlete. And that happened in 2019. So it wasn't like I turned pro and then immediately got this TV
Right.
opportunity. I had competed. I moved down to Florida for a hot second, moved back to Philly, then I moved out west. And then, as soon as I got my pro card, I was training, sacrificing, living the lifestyle, competing, 10 times a year, all over the place. And it was just that moment of like, all right, this is what it feels like to be a professional, right? Like it's one thing when you're just a regular, average weekend warrior competing.
Mhm.
But once you hit that professional level, it's like people start seeing you a little bit differently. Companies start treating you a little bit differently. But the biggest thing is all the doors that opened up because of how hard I was working. And what that told me was just like, man, like triathlon really does mimic your lifestyle in the sense that, you're gonna face trials and tribulations, things are gonna be very hard. You're gonna wake up tired every single day. You're gonna be stressing, you're gonna be upset, you're gonna question why is this happening, right? But because you are unrelenting in that pursuit of that goal that you have, and you stay focused, you stay disciplined, you work hard, you keep grinding, you keep grinding, you keep grinding, and next thing you know, all these doors start opening up for you.
Mhm.
You're like,
Right.
you go from, in my case, a kid that was raised by a single mother in King of Prussia being like, this random kid to next thing you know, LeBron James's production company is asking you to be on their television show.
Wow, wow, wow. So again, I'm a single, like raised a single parent, and that dynamic too, it does a certain self-reliance, there's a certain mindset. And so how would you then, I mean, you're describing a certain mindset. Was it a passion first? Was it a I want to be pro? Was it, I mean, what was the why that was the driving force that then the discovery of the results, that you, what was it? What's the it factor that you think it was for you?
Well, I mean, it first started off like originally I was just going to do triathlons to get my knee healthy so I could, go back to trying
Yeah.
out for soccer, right?
Yep.
But I think that it was the like, oh, it's kind of like, when you're playing a video game and you almost get close to the end and then you lose and then you want to
Oh,
try it again and
yeah.
then you
Okay.
want to try it again,
Yeah. Yeah.
right? So I think it was like, me as an athlete being like, all right, I'm trying something new. I almost won the thing. I'm very competitive. Let me see where this is going, right? And then when I look around and I get and I see like, oh, this is an opportunity for me to really kind of make a name for myself over here, as well as represent, because representation matters. So I think it was just this like, the universe just kind of like said, this door is closing over here, but these doors are open. And I was just willing to follow. Like every time a door opened up in triathlon, I was willing to follow it. So it started off with somebody lending me a bike, right? And then it started off with somebody saying, "Hey, here's a coach for you." Then it started off with me meeting someone like Shannon and being like, hey, I'll like, this, Olympic level coach being like, hey, I'll show you, like, I'll coach you and really take you to the next level. And then the same thing, it's, when I go and do a race and I win it, well, it's like, I want to keep winning, right? And I want to see, and then obviously you're going to want to see if you can beat the best. And again, in triathlon, if you're winning and you're making a name for yourself, then yeah, the dollars are going to start flowing after that as well, and the doors are going to start opening.
So window opens of opportunity, right? And so I mean, thinking about the viewer of this, okay, and that what's happening right now in this Norristown initiative, that this window of opportunity is opening here. And so that person watching this and say, wait, first I see someone that is a role model, and I'm listening to wonder if this is that opportunity, right? What would you like to say to that person who's just watching this, and to speak to your that 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 younger person? What would you say to them, what you just summarized right now, to them in this moment?
Yes, I'd be honest with them and I'd say like I understand that you would like to be the next LeBron James, or you would like to be the next Cam Newton, or what's the Phillies quarterback's name? Um uh
Man.
oh man, that's gonna bother me. Anyway, but like
No, come
uh
on, man. You don't.
I know.
You've been in
I say
California too long.
I say Cam Newton over Philadelphia's quarterback. That's so bad. But anyway, you know, I understand. I felt the same way. I wanted to go follow one of these mainstream sports and dream of getting a multi-million-dollar contract. But the fact of the matter is, it's like, the odds really aren't in your favor. But in triathlon and endurance sports, right, especially if you're a young kid, the likelihood of you becoming a pro triathlete or a pro endurance athlete in general, if you start as a young kid, I'd say it's probably like 80 to 90%. Like all the young kids that I've seen coming up after me are all now pro triathletes, right? So in what I would tell them is like, you got to understand, like, the doors that open up when you tell someone you're a pro triathlete, it's like somebody just wants to give you a job. Because when you tell them you're a pro triathlete, you're telling them what's your work ethic like. You're telling them what's your integrity like. You're giving them a very good understanding of the type of character you have. Because in order to be an endurance athlete or a pro triathlete, it takes a certain type of person to get to that point. Or even if you're just an average triathlete, it's endurance athletes were a certain type of individual, and triathlon mimics your regular life. So I would tell them that, like, hey, yeah, you're not going to make $1 million, but if the goal is to be able to pay your bills, get a shoe deal here or there, get a wetsuit deal, get a bike deal, get free product. I tell people all the time, I've barely paid for any clothes in the past 10 years. Like, I'm constantly getting clothes sent to me, shoes sent to me, glasses, those are the perks of being a pro triathlete, right? So again, it's like, yeah, okay, I don't have $1 million contract, but I have a roof over my head and people send me free stuff. Like it's Christmas in July for me on a consistent basis. So, I would say that pay attention to the doors that are open to you, and pay attention to the folks that are willing to invest in you and support you unconditionally. Because if once you have that happening, all you have to do is you have to put in the work, right? You just have to listen to their guidance, and more doors are going to open up, guaranteed.
Hmm. Wow. Okay. So, you're emphasizing the pro route, and because you live in that world, and then thinking about the person who may not have pro, I'll never be that. But at the same time, there's a certain thing about the mindset and the fact that in triathlon is this lifestyle, even beyond, one's pursuit. If they go into college and things like that, it becomes a lifestyle and a community as an adult. While at the same time speaking to that individual, because LA 2028 Olympics, Summer Olympics can be in LA next go around after Paris. And so we never know in this context with the Norristown development team what may come out. I'm hoping and praying that someone will emerge, to that. And so speaking to that person that has maybe that mindset, I have track and field, or that typical thinking. What would you encourage them? You already said it through what you said, but emphasize that here's an opportunity in this development team that may lead them in that 2028 aspirations. What might you say there?
Yeah, what I would say is the thing about triathlon, it's like the folks that are going to the Olympics and winning triathlons, they didn't start off as a triathlete, right? They oftentimes were like specialized in an individual sport. If it's track and field, football, basketball, soccer, whatever, or swimming, whatever it is. And really, it's going to come down to that athlete that, you know, it's really kind of like a certain level of grit and a certain level of just like, all right, let me see how this is going to unfold, right? It's very rarely the athlete that is like, really kind of forcing it. It's more so the athlete's just like, all right, I'm open to seeing what happens, but I'm going to give it 110% of my effort, right? I tell people this all the time. Like when I show up on the starting line, I'm not like, all right, I got to do it in this certain time. I got to, no, I'm there to have a good time and push my body and my mind as hard as humanly possible because I want to find out what I'm really made of. And again, it's a lifestyle, right? And really, what endurance sports in triathlon it teaches you is a certain level of self-reliance, right? In the physical sense, imagine your car breaks down on the side of the road and it's a 10-mile walk to your house and you don't have any self-service and it's 8 o'clock. As a triathlete, you probably got a pair of running shoes in your
I'll make this
car.
nice workout.
Yeah, you're either like, all right, I'm gonna run this or I'm just gonna walk it, right? That's the mindset that endurance and triathletes have, right? We find ourselves in, high pressure situations, and instead of crumbling and even as a kid, right, you're able to now kind of process and be like, all right, I can work myself through this because what happens is when you're in an endurance race, everyone will tell you you're going to hit this point where when you're going to face self-doubt. You're going to hit this point where your mind's going to tell you to quit. And what happens is the practice of you telling yourself, no, don't quit, right? The practice of telling yourself, no, I want to become an Olympian, and you stay on that road for the next 4 years, right? All of that is what builds you into this ultra, very, very resilient human being, right?
Mm.
So, pro card aside, what's more beneficial is if you're this human being, if you're this person, it's like, look, I can rely on myself. Like, no, like I'm in a tough situation. I can get through this. Oh, money's tight. I can figure out how to get through this. Oh, I need it. I'm struggling to figure out how to pay for my bills. Well, I'm going to keep working hard. I'm going to look for a solution, right? Because that's what happens in the triathlon. You might drop your water bottle, or you might get a flat tire, or you might be swimming and water gets in your goggles. And instead of freaking out, you're like, okay, I'm just gonna stop for a second, fix my goggles. All right, I got a flat tire. I'm gonna get off my bike and fix the tire. Right. Instead of being like, oh my gosh, you're like, all right, you breathe through it. You're able to process through it so that when you have something happening in your regular life, instead of it completely knocking you off or messing you up, you're able to actually work through it and get through it, right? And ultimately, it's about setting a goal for yourself and never giving up until you achieve that goal.
And the art of resilience and problem solving quick, adjust, flexibility, being nimble, psychological flexibility, and ability to just continue to move forward. That's definitely true of triathlon. Uh, let's go more into now in the diversity aspect of things. What has been your journey in the fact that you any pioneer that is the first of anything got a lot of critics. You got you have to navigate unknown territory. You're normalizing. You're creating norms. What's it like at the end of this, the tip of the spear? And then what would you say about what looking back to say now, look, these are you're leading, you're paving the way. Speaking to that to your fellow brother and sister.
Well, one of the best examples I reflect on when I think about is I remember when I used to get in a triathlon, or I remember when I first got in a triathlon, I would tell people like I'm a triathlete or pro triathlete, that they'd be like, "Oh, how'd you do in the swim?" Or like, "How does a swim go?" Right? And so it used to be like people would ask me those questions, and now the conversation has morphed into like they don't even bring that up. Right. So back when I got started, people used to say this racist term or whatever that like, oh, black people don't swim. Right. So along with like the Cullen Jones and the Simone Manuals and myself, I think people can't say black people don't swim anymore, especially if I'm a pro and I'm swimming better than them. Right. So, at the tip of it, it's like I've seen the growth in the sense of like, people thinking that about black folks not swimming to now being like, oh no, like, they've got, some athletes out there that are really representing, and it was rough getting there, but I also appreciate how all the negative comments, all the racist experiences made me so resilient that I was able to prove all my haters wrong and prove all those people's wrong to the point where like nobody dares would say to me like, "Oh, how's the swim go?" It's like, well, like I don't know, like I'm gonna beat you.
Mhm.
So,
Yeah, and also too. I mean, wouldn't you say? I mean, in terms of like, there's a community of support that kind of opened doors and paved the way. As long as you had the will and commitment to do that, it didn't matter what color they were, what have you. It was like it's like take advantage of those opportunities because it's gonna at the end of the day, it's gonna be up to you to now get into that space where then it sports is a level playing field, right? It's all based on the conditions and how you showed up, what you train, you're ready for the race, and it's the great equalizer, wouldn't you say?
yeah, well, I think that goes down to with what you're trying to build that, a lot of these athletes have to realize that they are surrounded by the best coaches and some of the best people in the industry that can really help them get there. And that's really good. That's really the hardest hurdle is if somebody can mentor you and guide you and help you understand the thing that you're going to foresee. So for me, right, not growing up as a swimmer, right, if I'm learning from John Kenny, like one of the best swimmers in the world, right, that also gives you a level of confidence come race day, right? Because you've been coached by the best, right? You've been coached by somebody that's, lived it, they've competed themselves and now they're a coach. So that gives you a certain level of confidence that you're like, all right, like I know that I can achieve this if as long as I listen to these individuals with how they're coaching me.
Okay. What's your kind of a kind of begin to start to wrapping this up. What are you optimistic of the future in the diversity of in the direction of there's the Ironman world and then there's the short course, two different mindsets and all that. And what how do you feel about the future? We're coming to our 50-year anniversary as a sport, September 25th. And so what's your take on what you're seeing the climate of triathlon and endurance as a sport?
Well, a lot of the things I'm seeing now, we've like a lot of us athletes, we've had conversations early on, the super leagues and the T100s, all that stuff. So, you know, I really think triathlon needs to pivot and really keep that focus on short course racing. Sprints and Olympic distance is where I've always thought where it's at. Like, yeah, maybe one day I'll do like I think, I'm waiting for it to click for me to want to do an Ironman. It's just that, there's something about going, fast, in short period of time. It doesn't beat up your body as much. It's just much more exciting. Olympic distances, or it's like 2 hour race, sprints are an hour race, and much more action packed. And I think that if most athletes, instead of thinking like, all right, I'm gonna, become this, Ironman athlete, it's like, well, no, focus on the short course because again, even though this program's centered around triathlon, training as a triathlete is going to get you ready for trail running. Well, there's trail running worlds. It's going to get you ready for road running. Well, there's Olympic trials and running, right? There's swimming. There's Olympic swimming, open water. There's opportunities there. Cycling, right? There's cycling time trial, road cycling, mountain biking, cyclocross, right? So training as a triathlete, as a young athlete, yeah, you might have hopes and dreams of becoming a pro triathlete, but come 18 years old, we might find out that you're a better cyclist, or you're a better 5K runner, or you're a better swimmer, right? So it's train like a triathlete, but again, be open for whatever doors might open along that way.
Yeah, yeah, that's true. You have so many options, and then it just develops you as a person, the lifestyle behind it. You're healthy. It opens up so many opportunities on that. And also the point that it is so true that if you focus on going short first, because my efficiency biomechanically, you really master that. And then when you go long course, then you already have good biomechanics and all that. And you bring that into just longer distance, and then
Yeah.
after that, fatigue resistance and everything related to that. But those that think that in the notion, I mean, I remember back in the days, like before it became an Olympic sport, it was still aspiring that one day it would be an Olympic sport. But that word Olympic was the international now distance as they were start forming that. But it was short course was just what you did. And then there was Ironmans. There was only 5 around at that time. It was just beginning. And so, but now we live in a day where it's like, oh, until I become an Iron Man, then I'm really a triathlete. No, no, not at all. It's like, no, focus. It's about swim, bike, run, and everything about that. So,
Yeah,
anything
absolutely.
you want to say about that? Unpack that.
Yeah, yeah. And just following up on that point, it's again, it's, you'll get the long workouts in, during, short course training, but again, it's, build up your foundation first and then see if you want to go long. You don't have to go long. Um, I do think the tide's kind of turning where it's just like, yeah, if you do a short course triathlon, you're still a triathlete. You're still top level, right? Because again, if you do a sub-hour sprint or, sub 2 hour Olympic, that's very elite level stuff.
Yeah,
So, as well as it's that development process, right? And being open to, where like like you got to listen to your body, right? You'll know, like, if you'll know when your body's saying like, oh, I can't run any faster, well, that's probably a sign that you should start running longer, right? But if you're someone that can run fast, for a short period of time, it's like maybe stick with the short course stuff.
okay. All right. Well, Max, just want to kind of close this up, and thank you so much. This has been a stimulating conversation just to see your development, your journey, and appreciate you just your time. And I would just like to kind of close and asking an open question is that what would you like the individual who is watching this uh, at our I'm coming up this coming Saturday, what would you like to say to them in a 90-second um, word of encouragement, and even how John and Shannon were part of that. But what would you like to encourage them of this window of opportunity that is presented to them right now?
Yeah, so with that question you just asked me, the first thing that came to mind is I've had conversations with a few, outside of Shannon and John. There were times when I moved out here, I was introduced to Michael Johnson, introduced to Barry Bonds, And then I had certain private conversations with certain former Olympian triathletes. And they all said the same thing to me, which was give it a go, Max. Give it a go. All right. And I would say the same thing to these athletes that if you trust in your coaches, you're going to get to where I'm at, right? Shannon and John have the formula to take whatever type of athlete it is and help them reach to that next potential. But the best advice I can give them is the same advice to me that was given to me is just give it a go, right? Just give it all you've got, show up to practice, listen to the coaches and see what happens when the doors open. And when those doors open, walk through, turn around, ask your coaches for some guidance, say, hey, is this the right door that I'm supposed to be walking through? Trust in your coaches and just give it a go.
Mm. That summarizes it. Give it a go. That's like, just do it.
Yeah, absolutely.
All right. Well, thank you very much, Max. And we're going to end this interview and just hold tight. And thank you so much for your time.
Yeah, thanks for having me.